I want to welcome you all to the Chabad Aspen Jewish Community Center, and I want to welcome you, come right down here. I want to welcome you for Rabbi Mendel Mintz, to another one of our summer events. We have events all year. Gerald, right up front. We have events all year, but in the summer we make an extra effort to do a number of events so that we can learn, so that we can help teach others, so that we can help answer others' questions, such as our children, or our grandchildren, or our neighbors. And that's why we run many of these events, whether they have to do with your health, whether they have to do with the health of the state of Israel or American Jewry. We do this so we can learn. And I point out to you our bulletin, our summer event bulletin, that's available in the back, in the hall, and downstairs, so you can not only see what's coming up, and I'll briefly tell you that, but also so you can see what you've missed. So next summer, you'll come more early and often. Just to touch a bit on what we have coming this week. You know, it's not easy holding a double microphone. We have movie night tomorrow night. We're showing on the map the story of the Israeli basketball team winning the European Championship, which had never happened before. All the proceeds to this, yes. What's that?
This microphone died, so just if you won't mind, I'll speak into that one as well.
Hi.
Still hang on to that.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
This microphone died, but we don't say special prayers for microphones. So the Wednesday night movie is tomorrow night. The proceeds, and I believe that's $25 a ticket, go to our Ski to Live organization, Golshem L'Chaim, which helps support bringing in the disabled Israeli vets every February, March to learn to ski. I can't tell you how wonderful that program is. Then on Wednesday, August 2nd, we have the movie Faith Keepers, which talks about the persecution of Christians and other minorities in the Middle East. It is a very striking video, and I recommend you come and listen to it, because I suspect most of you are not aware of how serious a problem this is. We will also have Raheel Reza, who's the executive producer. She is a Muslim who will be talking to us both about the movie and about other persecution in the Middle East. Part of being invited to this wonderful center to hear these events, we also want to invite you to celebrate with us on August 4th, which is Friday, where we will celebrate the 3rd anniversary of this magnificent center. So please feel free to join us, call the office, call the wonderful person who runs just about everything here and makes all of these events possible, and that is Inga, who is ignominiously sitting in the back. Wave, Inga, please. We thank you. As I mentioned, we have these events to learn, because we like to think we learn from the media. We like to think we learn from books, from movies, from cinema, and most of the time we will learn something, but we don't know how much of that is truth. Of course, this has been in the news for the last 6 months or so, but when it comes to Israel, there's even more of it, more hypocrisy, more double standard. When I lecture about estrogen and menopause, I often will refer to estrogen as the Israel of hormones. It also, there's so much misinformation and hypocrisy out there about it. So we learn from people who are experts so that we can teach, so that we can answer questions, so that we can keep our cool in answering questions and explain what the truth is. And in light of that, we have brought in two people from Israel for this event. This is a schlep, believe me, to come to Aspen from Israel. And we thank both of them. They've come to speak about the essence of Judea and Samaria, which some have called the West Bank of the Jordan River, if you would. And what is Judea and Samaria? How did it get there? How is Israel involved with this area? How is the homeland involved with this area? And also, what else is going on in these areas? Because in these areas are a lot of Palestinian villages and cities. And not only what is this area, but why are we dealing with what we're dealing with? Who are our partners in the, quote, peace process? And unfortunately, too frequently, that peace is spelled P-I-E-C-E, wanting more and more pieces of the land of Israel. So what we're going to hear from these experts today is what is the situation, what is the reality on the ground, and what's real and what maybe is made up. So first, I want to introduce you to Eve Harrow. When Judy and I go over each February for Camera's annual board meeting in Israel, we have many people who teach us and speak to us, and Eve was one of them. She's transformed her singular passion for Israel into a vocation through guiding visitors across the country as a licensed Israeli tour guide. And that is no small occupation. As those of you who have been to Israel well know, only the best become Israeli guides. She hosts Rejuvenation with Eve Harrow on the internet-based The Land of Israel radio network, which you can all hear, and she'll mention that as well. And she's a popular guest speaker in many global media forums. We still have it working? Okay. She's been involved with Israel advocacy generally. She lives in Efrat, which is in Judea. We'll learn how to use those terms better, Judea and Samaria. She and our other speaker, Itamar Marcus, and the speaker we brought in a few years ago, Caroline Glick, all live in Efrat. So that kind of tells me if I emigrate to Israel, that's where I'm going to live. She's the director of tourism for the One Israeli Fund. She's on the board of governors of Ariel University. She's served 10 years serving as a councilwoman in Efrat. And she received her master's degree with honors in psychology from Pepperdine. She's also a graduate of Bar Ilan University's leadership program for religious women and American Jewish Committee's course for building tolerance in Israeli society. With a combined voice of a media personality, a political activist, a tour guide, and a mother of 7 wonderful children, the last of whom has finished his service in the IDF. Eve's love of the land and her people is both refreshing and inspiring. Please welcome from Israel, Eve Harrow.
Hi, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. I want to thank Alan and thank the rabbi. And before I go hide behind my apple, which is actually something that someone named Eve did a long time ago, but in a whole different context. I just wanted to say that, and I think I speak for Itamar here as well, we don't really want to be doing what it is that we're doing. We're very happy to be in Aspen, very happy to be in all of you, but both of us moved to Israel as adults and realized that there were things happening there that nobody knew were really happening. And it became incumbent upon us to some degree, bring the mountain to Muhammad, if you will. And so I appreciate that you all came here tonight. And I think that in an hour, you're going to be wiser, possibly a little sadder, because the things that we're going to tell you are not so easy, but you have to know them, because ignoring things or being ignorant of what's happening in the Middle East is not good for anybody. It's not good for America. Way too many Americans are clueless as to really what's happening on the other side of the pond, right? So I have some maps, because I firmly believe that with all due respect to the Bible and every other book that was written, the most important text is context. And we didn't just end up where we are today. This has been a whole process. And sometimes I look at the news and I think, people might think that Israel was established in order to create a Palestinian state. Right? Israel was not established in order to create a Palestinian state. Israel was established because the Jewish people have always had a home in Israel, and now we came back. All right? And that's what we're doing. So, with that, this is the map that Israelis know, and this is a map that tends to make us a bit nervous, okay? In your neighborhood, right? Your neighborhood is everything, so take a look at our neighbors, okay? When we talk about being the only democracy in the Middle East, we're not kidding, okay? And this doesn't even include the Soviet Union and some other really pleasant people in our neighborhood. And it is a point of very great pride as Israelis that we are a democracy. The people who founded the state were not raised on Thomas Jefferson. All right, they were raised in communist and socialist environments, and so it is a very, very big deal. And it also means that the values that Israel has are the same values that the West has, and that is not to be taken for granted. Sometimes we in Israel think that people are kind of like jollying Israel along, maybe because the Bible says, be nice to the Jews, or maybe for some guilt over the Holocaust or whatever it is. Israel is a tremendous value to the United States. It's a much more equal relationship than people think. If America didn't have Israel, you'd have to invent her. An ally, a strong, secure ally in the Middle East, also in tune with the very values that make America great and with the needs that America has there. And so when you the problem that we have living in Israel is that a lot of what we do is based on intelligence, so we can't talk about it. A lot of the value that we give to the world are things that we can't say. So when we're in countries that we don't have diplomatic relations with, helping them feed their people, we can't talk about it, because then the leader of the country would be forced to throw the Israelis out, because his people would say, what's going on? We don't have the Jews, the Israelis. And so we do it because it's the right thing to do. We do it because that's what Jews have always done, is not just thought about ourselves, but thought about how to make the world a better place. But very often it means that people don't understand Israel the way they should. And they think we're just some kind of banana republic, which is so far from the truth. So starting with that map, the Balfour Declaration, how does the modern-day state of Israel come about? So, World War I is only really ending now, right? It's been 100 years since the end of World War I, but if you take a look at the map of the Middle East that I just showed you, we'll go back for a second. Whenever you see straight lines, let's say Colorado and Utah as opposed to Massachusetts, that tells you that somebody imposed those borders. All right? So a lot of these countries did not exist 100 years ago. And they are part and parcel of the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in World War I. So in 1917, at the tail end of World War I, Lord Balfour of Britain said, I'm sure you are all literate here in Aspen, so I was told, so I don't know if I have to read this out loud, but talks about establishing a homeland for the Jews in Palestine. Where does the term Palestine incidentally come from? From Hadrian, the Roman emperor in the 2nd century, who has figured that he's destroyed Judea, Jews, Judaism, and so he's going to rename the area Syrio-Palestine after the Syrians and after the Philistines. That's where the name Palestine comes from. All right? So in this mandate that that England is going to get as the Ottoman Empire falls apart, they promise, and this is a very big deal, the Balfour Declaration. It's 100 years since then, which is why you might have been hearing about it. All right? So the British get a mandate for Palestine. As the British and the French pretty much divide up the Middle East, what was the Ottoman Empire. And They do a lot of interesting things. The Saudi royal family gets Saudi Arabia. The Hashemites get Iraq and Jordan. There's a little wrinkle in what's happened over here, in that there's oil in the Middle East. And the British very badly want that oil. And so they take the mandate for Palestine. The initial mandate for Palestine is what's light brown and dark brown. And 75% of it is cut off to the Jews. The Jewish National Fund had already bought land in what's called Transjordan on this map. All right, there was going to be Jewish settlement all over the light and the brown and the dark brown, but 75% of it is cut off for the Jews. Now, what many people don't talk about, even more important than the Balfour Declaration, is the San Remo Conference in Italy in April of 1920 that's further solidified by the League of Nations in 1922. And what that does is it takes the very lovely suggestion of Lord Balfour and puts it into international law. The League of Nations is the precursor to today's UN. You know, there are sometimes, and you might get this also, it's like Israel's on probation. Israel's like this pariah state, and we have to constantly justify why we have the right to exist. I don't think there is another country in the world that has as much a right to exist as Israel, because we were solidified in law both by the League of Nations and by the UN. There is no other country that has been voted in. Most countries just came about, all right, or manifest destiny, or whatever it was, all right? So this is a point that those, I assume if you're in this room, unless you did something really terrible and your parole officer said you either go here, Eve Harrow, tonight, or you're off to jail, I assume you're here because you care about Israel and you want to know these things, and all of you need to know this. You all need to know this, because every one of you has to be an ambassador for Israel. We can't do it by ourselves in Israel. And what's good for Israel is good for you as well. So that's why this talk about the maps and the history, because it's very important to know how we got to where we are today. All right, so moving right along for the British mandate for Palestine. There's all kinds of different there had been different plans up from then, all right? The different commissions that were sent by the UN. The British really didn't want to leave. Like I said, oil was found, they're developing Haifa as a port to bring oil then out to Europe. And there's all kinds of different commissions that come through deciding how to divide Palestine. This isn't a great picture here, but you can see that the final one, which is over here, is what's called the 1947 partition plan. Great story, by the way, about why the Jews we get the yellow as part of the partition plan, which is mainly the Negev. That bottom triangle part is pretty much uninhabitable. The Jews actually do something very fun. In Motzei Yom Kippur, the fast day, in 1946, was a Saturday night. And the British guards like to drink on Saturday night. The Jews went out, they took advantage of the British guards having a little too much, whatever, and go out and establish 11 settlements in the Negev overnight. Now, we took advantage of a loophole in the Ottoman law, which said that you can't build a new community, but you also, it's against the law to take down something if the roof is already on. So they quickly, literally overnight, build these little mini kinds of fortresses, and they establish 11 settlements in the Negev, but you need water. You need to be able to get water. So what had happened was there were 6-inch pipes that were left over in London, of all places, that were left over from the Blitz, right? The Germans had attacked London during World War II, and the British had put out sprinklers to put out the fires all over London, and were left at the end of the war with these 6-inch pipes. So someone from the Yishuv, someone from the Jews in not yet Israel, goes to London, brings over these pipes, and that's what connected the 11 settlements to water. So when that last group comes of the UN looking to decide how to partition Palestine, they see that the Jews have made the Negev semi-green, and so they give it to the Jews. And it was an interesting way that we did that. But if you take a look at this map, this is an incredibly important map. Beersheba, which for all of us right now is the capital of the Negev, if you're familiar with Israel, it's in the green area. It's in the area that's given over to the Arabs. The green is given to the Arabs, the yellow is given to the Jews. Akko as well. But the most important thing about this map is the lack of access to Jerusalem for the Jews. See the pink in the middle? So the pink in the middle, Jerusalem had more Jews at the time, and really the Jews should have been given Jerusalem. But Bethlehem is gerrymandered in, and so it's about half-half. And then the UN can say, no, you know what, the Jews aren't going to get Jerusalem, we're going to internationalize it. Except that you'll notice that for the Jews, there's no access to Jerusalem. The Jews accept this map. Ben Gurion and the people who are in charge accept this map. Why? It's 1947. It's 2 years after World War II. We have the remnants of European Jewry sitting in displaced persons camp with nowhere to go. We need a state. And Ben Gurion, it seems, in diaries of his that were later let out, that he felt that he'd always said we have to have Jerusalem, but he felt, and it turns out that he was right, that any place that we fought over and lost, all the Jews would be thrown out. So better to take Jerusalem and have Jews living in Jerusalem, even under foreign rule, than risk not having Jerusalem at all. So the Jews accept this plan in 1947. The Arabs living in Israel do not. From November 29th, 1947, until May 15th, 1948, the Arabs within this area wage war against the Jews. And then, when the state is declared on May 14th, 1948, the next phase of the war, of Israel's war of independence comes out, and we are attacked by 7 Arab armies. Now, this map here, the blue, is what most people would recognize as Israel. This is Israel between 1948 and 1967. But this map is incredibly important because this map outs the Palestinians. When they talk about the tragedy for themselves, the catastrophe, they're talking about the Nakba. That's their word, okay? The birth of the state of Israel is, for the local Arabs, the Nakba, the catastrophe. Not 1967, not the Six-Day War, this map, which tells you that their intention here isn't to have a two-state solution and live side by side with Israel. Their idea is to eradicate Israel, to replace Israel with a Palestine, and they say it themselves. We just have to understand what they're talking about. The PLO Covenant, which talks about liberating Palestine, was written in 1964. In 1964, Israel did not control Judea and Samaria. It's not until the 1967 Six-Day War. So that's another clue as to what's really going on. Now, what happens in 1949 is you can see that Egypt takes Gaza, right, where the beige goes up, and Jordan extends their control over Judea and Samaria and half of Jerusalem. Why? Where did they have the right to do that? If they're supposed to be a Jewish state and a Palestinian state, why does Jordan take over? And they rename it, because just like Hadrian 1,800 years ago, they're not going to call a place Judea, because somebody might say, why is Judea now Yud and Rhine? Because what they do is ethnically cleanse the Jews from Judea and Samaria. Where Itamar and I live, there were 4 Jewish communities there who, after they surrendered during the war in 1948, were slaughtered. Some were taken out into Jordanian captivity, and the ones in Kfar Etzion, 240 people after they surrendered, are killed. So this area they rename the West Bank, meaning the West Bank of the Jordan River, an amorphous term, but trying to cut out the connection to Judea and to these lands. All right, so this is what the situation is like. It's intentionally an armistice line. These are not borders. These are ceasefire lines of April of 1949. Now, for 19 years, Israel is very much alone. Nobody's helping us. Sometimes we'll buy weapons from France, sometimes they'll deliver it, and usually just to annoy the British. We're all by ourselves because we're weak. And the world isn't going to back somebody who's weak. It's only after the 1967 war, when we prove that we're strong and that we're of value to other people, that the Americans come in and start, being a part of Israel's life. One of the drivers that I work with when I guide grew up in Bnei Brak, just outside of Tel Aviv. Both his parents were Holocaust survivors, and he grew up in a neighborhood of all survivors, and he has got stories to tell of everything that they went through. But he remembers his parents sitting them down in May of 1967 and saying, whatever happens, just remember you're a Jew. Because they had survived the Holocaust, many of them had buried their first families, their first spouses, their first children, come to Israel and restarted a family, and they were sure They were sure that the Arabs were now going to finish what they had started. They were digging mass graves in Israel. If you don't know what was going on in May of 67, and it's a long time ago, it's 50 years ago, so many people are too young to know. You have to realize how the Israelis felt that we were on the threshold of being annihilated. And this is what Israel looks like on June 11th, 1967. The entire Sinai Peninsula captured from the Egyptians in a preemptive strike. Syria, which has been bombing Israel from the north anyway, from the Golan Heights. Israel has taken the Golan Heights. And Judea and Samaria liberated from the Jordanians. Why do I say liberated? Because Jordan occupied Judea and Samaria. Only one country in the world, the leading luminary of human rights, Pakistan, recognized Jordan's sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. Israel, right after the war, offers to exchange everything for peace, except for the old city of Jerusalem, and is turned down flat. The Khartoum Conference. No to peace, no to recognition, no to negotiation. So we accept the partition plan. War is waged against us. We fight another war that we don't want. Immediately afterwards, we offer to give everything away for peace, and we're told no. Over and over and over again, this is what's happening. We're like the only losers who constantly have to beg people to come and make peace with us the only winners. After we win the war, we act like the losers. Now, at the end of the 1970s, the early 1980s, the Sinai Peninsula is given to Egypt in return for our peace treaty with them. That, incidentally, is why now, because there's a pattern here, the Sinai is terror central. Because when the terrorists are having trouble, Muslim Brotherhood, etc., the Salafists in Egypt, they know that Sinai has been demilitarized because of the peace treaty with Egypt. So they know that the Egyptian military can't follow them into the Sinai. And that's why they go. And Israel has to some degree now done something that's very dangerous and allowed the Egyptian military into Sinai, to some degree abrogating our peace treaty with Egypt, so that they will go after the terrorists who are making life miserable for absolutely everybody. Okay? So that's where the Sinai and Judea and Samaria, and of course Syria. 1993, the Oslo Accords. Israelis are convinced that we have to trade land for peace. Okay? And that the Arabs living among us don't want to be there, they don't want us ruling them, and a lot of Israelis don't want to either. We're tired of sending our kids into the refugee camps to find terrorists. Figure, you know what? We're convinced that this is going to be good for us. We're going to establish an authority, the Palestinian Authority, no less than Yasser Arafat's going to be brought in from Tunis. He's going to rule it. And you don't have to have a master's degree in psychology to understand how we were dreaming. That we expected the Fatah, the PLO, to be arresting people who belong to Islamic Jihad and Hamas in order to protect Jews. But that's exactly what we were convinced that we were going to do. And so in 1993, this is the Oslo map. You might have heard of areas A, B, and C. So the yellow areas are what's known as Area A, initially given completely to the Palestinian Authority. Security control, garbage pickup, educating their children, absolutely everything. Israel retains the rights to still fly over and have general security, but within those areas, totally under the Palestinian control. And the brown areas are what's known as Area B, which means that Israel still retains security control, our army can go in, but everything else is under the Palestinian Authority. Now, essentially today, there's no difference between the yellow and the brown, because about 15, 16 years ago, Israel realized that these areas were being used as the biblical arei miklat, the biblical shelters, right? It's the houses of refuge. That when there were people who committed terrorism, they are running into these cities and they are being sheltered by the Palestinian Authority. All right, the Fatah, the PLO, the Palestinian Authority is aiding and abetting terror all the way through. And in March of 2002, after 121 Israelis are killed just in March, the Passover massacre, right, in Netanya. Still today, when I hear more than one ambulance, I start to shake. All right, because more than one ambulance meant a bus, you turned on the news, a bus had been blown up, or something had happened that was really terrible. It wasn't someone going to the hospital quickly because she's about to have triplets and she's in labor. All right, and we still all felt like that. Israel finally took the security control back, and now our soldiers are going into these places and are managing to still catch terrorists before they come out. All right, so this is where we are sitting right here. Now, we were told this is land for peace. The major plank of the Oslo Accords was that they were going to stop terror. And the hot and heavy issues were going to be left for after everybody was chill and everybody trusted each other, and we knew that they also wanted a Palestinian Israel, they wanted democracy. Except as you're going to hear from Itamar, and so he's going to do an amazing job to show you why that hasn't happened. But this is where we're stuck. And the world somehow feels that the onus is still on us. I just want to show you very quickly, and then I'll turn over the mic, Gaza. In 2005, we did something else. We unilaterally left Gaza. We pulled 10,000 Jews out of their homes. I was there up until the last day. I moved there during the summer with my children. First of all, I was hoping that it wouldn't happen. But I had very many friends who were farmers there and who were about to lose their homes in this very misguided attempt. And now, of course, everybody involved, just yesterday, Michael Oren, the former ambassador to America from Israel, just yesterday he said it was a mistake. He took part in it, and I didn't really understand. He said, it was a mistake, but I'm glad I took part in it. Anyhow, I have to research that a little more, exactly how that works. But we left Gaza in 2005, turned it all over, not asking for anything back from the Palestinian Authority. Of course, within 2 years, it goes to Hamas. And now we have the Negev being rocketed and that area turning into just a whole terror state. So you see the pattern here, wherever we leave, chaos follows. And it's not that we're control freaks, but there's a couple of major issues here. One is, these places also belong to us. We're not just here for the security reasons. Yes, after the Holocaust, it's good that we have an army, and I think we all understand the importance of Jews being able to protect ourselves. But it's much, much more than that. All right, these are places that we have roots. These are places, I went for a drive with Alan, and he showed me the Continental Divide. So Israel's version of the Continental Divide is outside of our house, what we call the watershed, the way of the patriarchs, where our forefathers walked on their way to Jerusalem. You cannot build anything, you can't dig in the land of Israel, and especially in Judea and Samaria, without coming upon something from our glorious history. We have come home, and the moral and right thing is for Jews to be able to live in Judea. When people tell me that for peace and coexistence, I'm going to have to leave my home, my first question is, how's that coexistence if I'm not going to be here? And the answer is, but it'll be dangerous, you won't be able to stay. And then my second question is, so how is that peace? So I am a true liberal. I believe in peace, I believe in coexistence, but I also understand that we have to stand up proudly and make sure that people understand that we have rights there and that life is so much better for everybody involved when Israel is in control. So, and now I will turn over the floor to Itamar. Thank you.
This on again? Yes, good. Eve, thank you. Compelling, passionate, and appropriate that we learn all of this and relearn all of this information. So we appreciate that greatly. We will have time for questions afterwards. See well. All right. Itamar Marcus is founder and director of Palestinian Media Watch, and he's one of the foremost authorities on Palestinian ideology and policy. He was appointed by the Israeli government in 1999 to represent Israel in negotiations with the PA on incitement. This is 1999. He's presented analyses of Palestinian ideologies in academic, cultural, and government frameworks, including hearings, lectures and briefings to members of U.S. Congress and Senate, the Canadian, British, French, German, Norwegian, Dutch, and Australian parliaments, and members of the European Parliament. He's lectured at conferences at universities to senior security officials worldwide. We should bring him in for the Aspen Security Conference. He's lectured at, he gives analysis on CNN, Fox News, the BBC, and a full range of world TV news. Now, Palestinian Media Watch is an Israeli research institute that studies Palestinian society from a broad range of perspectives by monitoring and analyzing the Palestinian Authority through its media, its school books as well. The major focus of this organization is on the messages that the Palestinian leaders from the Palestinian Authority, Fatah, and Hamas send to the population through the broad range of institutions and infrastructures they control. Basically, what Itamar and his group does is translate into the English what is being said in the Palestinian territories, if you would, so that the West understands what is said to their own people in these territories, as opposed to what the Palestinian leadership says to the Western media in English. And I just want to point out to you, and I don't mean to steal Itamar's fire here, but in the past 2 months, specifically because of the work that Palestinian Media Watch has done under Itamar's leadership, 2 countries, Denmark and Norway, who have not been real fond of Israel over the decades, have stopped funding the Palestinian Authority because of their giving of these monies to terrorists and terrorist families. And this is what happens when you do the kind of work that Itamar does. So please welcome him to Chabad.
Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you for inviting us here. And I want to thank all of you for moving to Aspen. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been invited here. And it's just been a beautiful time and a beautiful place. So thank you for moving here, and thank you for inviting us. Palestinian Media Watch was founded in 1996. That's 3 years after the signing of the Oslo Accords. We wanted to know what was happening in the internal Palestinian world. What were they saying to each other? What were they teaching their children? What were the activities that people were participating in? Because we felt that by seeing what was happening in the internal world, we'll know to what extent we really have a peace partner. And that was critical. What are they educating their children? How are they presenting Jews? How are they presenting Israel? How are they presenting the whole situation? And to this end, we have been using the media as a window to Palestinian society, studying everything we can about the society through the window of the media. In fact, if we were naming the organization today, we wouldn't call it Palestinian Media Watch. We'd call it Palestinian Leadership Watch or Palestinian Authority Watch, because we're really looking at much more than the media. We look at the sports pages, culture, even crossword puzzles in the official media to get a sense of what's going on. And a general conclusion that we have reached is that there are 2 different worlds. There is the internal world for internal consumption. There's the English language world for foreign consumption. What I want to give you today, and very often, there is no resemblance between the 2. And I want to give you today's little window into that internal Palestinian world, what is happening amongst them, and why is it happening. Now, I want to open up with an item that appeared last year. This was while the terror was going on, the terror wave, with a lot of knifings. They called it a knife intifada. Fatah, which is the party of Mahmoud Abbas, which is supposed to be the moderates, put this on their official Facebook page, and it went as follows. To those who argue with Fatah, to the ignorant and to those who do not know history, Fatah has killed 11,000 Israelis. It continues, Fatah has sacrificed 170,000 martyrs. Now, both of these numbers are gross exaggerations. They have not killed anywhere near 11,000 Israelis. Through terror, we've lost about 2,000, 3,000, depending on when you start counting, civilians to Palestinian terror, not near 11,000. And they haven't nearly lost this many number. And then the list went on. The first to carry out operations in the first intifada and the second intifada. The entire list Fatah was listing attacks, killings, all the things they did promoting war. Now, it didn't say Fatah signed the Oslo Accords. It didn't have anything positive about peace. It only had negatives. So the question is, why is Fatah bragging and exaggerating about killing and exaggerating about what it's done? Why is this message coming through to its people? Now, I want to show you, after we released this story, both the New York Times and Newsweek reported on this, and I want to show you how they took it. The New York Times wrote as follows: in an effort to appeal to Palestinians ahead of elections, the party of Mahmoud Abbas listed one of its main achievements, having killed 11,000 Israelis. Newsweek said the same thing. It was to get more voters. Now, the United States had an election last year, very controversial. I would say Trump and Clinton didn't agree on just about anything, but neither of them would have come to the American people and said, vote for me because I killed 11,000 Afghanis or Iraqis, and vote for me, I'm going to kill 11,000. That wouldn't have brought votes. What is it about the Palestinian population that they feel that killing 11,000 people is something is something positive, at least according to the New York Times? So what is the position of killing Israelis in Palestinian society? That's the first question. The second question I want to ask, and as we go through and learn about what they teach their people, we'll get an answer. Last year's terror wave, what are the things that was unique about it? Again, you will remember there were knifings all over the place. There were many, many car rammings. There was a number of shootings. The age of the terrorists was younger than it ever was before. 50% were under the age of 19. 50%. And 10% were under the age of 15. And I'm talking about terrorists. For example, Daphne Meir, woman, mother of 6 children, was stabbed in her home by a 15-year-old boy who came into her house and stabbed her to death in her kitchen in front of her screaming children. And I can't imagine a 15-year-old taking a knife and stabbing it into a dead animal in the street. And yet this Palestinian boy of age 15 was able to go into a home, a live person, a human being, and stab them to death. And this wasn't. So what is it about the messaging to Palestinian children that is creating a whole generation, literally, of people who see killing Israelis as something that they're willing to do or expected to do? So those are the questions that I want to open with. And I'm going to start with sports. Because when I showed you that we study Palestinian sports, you probably were wondering, why are we bothering? What are we going to find in the sports pages? Well, it turns out that because sports is so innocent, we're actually finding something very, very significant. Some of the most significant things about the Palestinian Authority. Now, what did we find? Since the period of 2000 to 2004 or 5, what they call the Intifada, we call the terror campaign, the terror war, the Palestinian terror war, Palestinians started naming sporting events after terrorists, especially terrorists who killed the largest number of Israelis. So the Ministry of Education of the Palestinian Authority in 2003 sponsored a tournament they called the Abdul Basit Udeh Championship Cup. Who was Abdul Basit Udeh? Suicide bomber who went into a hotel on Passover Eve during the Seder and blew himself up and murdered 31 Israelis. So that act by Abdul Basit Udeh was enough for the Ministry of Education of the Palestinian Authority to sponsor an event in his honor. Now, as bad as it was during that period when there was an active terror campaign, the real problem was it never stopped. And until today, we have documented it, and you can find it on our website, hundreds and hundreds of more examples of sporting events named after terrorists. Now, I want to show you 2 very shocking ones that happened last year. This is one of the most shocking ones we've seen altogether because of the age involved. The youngest terrorist in the terror wave was a boy named Ahmed Ben Nasra, 13-year-old Palestinian boy who saw an Israeli 13-year-old riding home from school on his bicycle in Jerusalem, and he knocked him off his bicycle and took a knife and stabbed it into the Israeli 13-year-old's neck. The Israeli boy was in a coma for 2 weeks. In the end, he survived. Now, Ahmed Ben Nasra was arrested, and because he was so young, and because part of it after it was filmed on TV, he became a Palestinian hero. So look what the Ministry of Education of the Palestinian Authority did. They sponsored an Ahmed Ben Nasra football tournament. Many schools from Ramallah and El Bira participated. Look at the cup being handed to this boy. How old is this boy? The same age approximately as the 13-year-old boy. So what is the message to all of these children who participated and all the schools that, if you want to have a cup, a football cup, a soccer cup named after you, that you'll have a tournament named after you, you don't have to be good in soccer, you don't have to do good in school. What do you have to do? Go out and stab an Israeli. and we're going to name something after you. That's the message coming through from this tournament to Palestinian children. And it wasn't the only example during last year. We had many. I'll just show you one more example. This was March 23rd last year. March was about the height of the terror wave. Many teenagers involved. Teenage girls were also involved. I don't know if you remember, in the Machane Yehuda market in Jerusalem, 2 15-year-old Palestinian girls went to the market, bought each of them a scissors, and then they went and they stabbed an old man walking by in the neck. Turns out the old man altogether was an Arab who they were stabbing. But they were trying to kill a Jew. 15-year-old girls, and look at the ages of these girls. This is a basketball tournament called the Dalal Maghribi Cup, who is sponsored by, again, the Ministry of Education of the Palestinian Authority. Who is Dalal Maghribi? She's the person responsible for the murder of these 12 children. Bus hijacking in 1978, 37 people were killed, 12 children, 27 adults. Dalal Maghribi led the bus hijacking, and so the Palestinian Authority names this basketball tournament. So the message coming through from sports, and hundreds of examples like this, if you kill an Israeli, you're a Palestinian hero. Now, I want to show you something else. There's another side to sports, which is also significant. Sports could be a bridge for peace. In fact, Israel has tried, since the Oslo Accords, to create peace activities between Palestinians and Israelis, and one of the means is sports, and one of the organizations is the Paris Peace Center that tries to keep having Palestinians and Israelis meet. Now, I want to show you, first of all, the Palestinian Authority prohibits sporting events where children will see each other as human beings. They call it normalization. The Palestinian Authority has a special committee to prevent normalization, meaning prevent peace with Israel. Literally, if you want to have any activity with Israelis, there's a committee that prohibits it. Now, what happens when something successful happens? I want to show you this. This was after the Gaza War in 2014. Paris Center for Peace organizes a soccer tournament for Palestinian and Israeli kids, and listen to this, I'm going to read to you from this article by France Press. The tension was easily discernible at first, but the young players' enthusiasm for the game prevailed. Ofer, an 11-year-old Israeli, said, "It's great to come back here and enjoy our time after weeks stuck at home during the war." Now, listen to what this 11-year-old Palestinian named Kusai said. "I love it when we play together like this. I hope one day there'll be peace between Arabs and Jews and there'll be no more wars and death." Now, this is amazing. One afternoon of contact with an Israeli kids, and the Palestinian already learned that peace is better than war. That's fantastic. So you'd want this to be multiplied. Now look how the Palestinian Authority responded to this. So a few days later, after this was announced, Palestinian Olympic Committee member denounced the match, considered it a crime, unpatriotic and immoral, and he called on the head of the Palestinian Authority, Jibril Rajoub, the sports authority, to interrogate the organizers and prosecute them on charges of serious treason. And then a couple of days later, Jibril Rajoub announced, this is not only, he is in charge of all the sports in the Palestinian Authority, he's also the number 2 in the PA. He's the number 2 in the PA based on the last election, which means that when Mahmoud Abbas, who's in his 80s, decides to retire, there's a good chance that he's going to be the next leader of the Palestinian Authority. So how did he respond to this sporting event where a Palestinian child learned that peace is better than war? This is what he said: "Any activity of normalization in sports with the Zionist enemy is a crime against humanity." Peace building is a crime against humanity, according to the number 2 in the Palestinian Authority. So what are the Palestinians learning just through sports? If you kill an Israeli or a Palestinian hero, if you make peace with an Israeli, it's a crime against humanity. You're a traitor. You're going to be prosecuted. That's what's coming through just from sports. Now, I want to show you, there are so many things we could talk about. I want to focus on one particular message. And basically, it's critical because it's what are we fighting about? What are the Palestinians fighting about? Why do they tell their people they're fighting Israel? What are they fighting? Now, what we're finding in the last few years is they have adopted all of the Hamas messages about reasons and motivation for fighting Israel. And what do I mean by that? That's what I'm going to show you. First of all, Hamas is openly a religious organization. It's an Islamic organization. If you read through their charter, the word Inshallah, praise Allah, and Allah willing, and quotes from the Quran and the Hadith are all throughout. It's a religious movement fighting against Jews for God. Now I want to show you how the Palestinian Authority, the moderates, who had said all along, and they still insist in English, that it's a territorial war, what they really tell their people and why this is so dangerous. Now, Jews are monkeys and pigs. Why? This is an official Palestinian Authority television program. This is what children are learning. Okay, sons of Zion, the most evil amongst creations. How is this child going to make peace, or the children learning this going to make peace with Israel, if we're the most evil of Allah's creations? We're barbaric monkeys. The poem continues, wretched pigs. This is the third child in recent years that has said the identical poem on Palestinian television. These are taken from Islamic sources, and they're applying it for young children today. Now I want to show you another message, and this is one of the critical messages. This has to do with Satan and the Jew. In Islam, the evil force in the world that's bringing all the evil to the world is Satan. You can learn it about, but it's this. Now, what does the Satan do? The Satan doesn't do it himself, and there are a number of Satans, by the way. There are a whole group of Satans. They employ people on earth to do the evil in the world, and Islam is fighting against this evil. Who have the Palestinians been teaching their people at every different age level? Is the ally of Satan? It's the Jews. Now I want to show you this, first how it comes to adult, and this is critical. The person you're going to be speaking is Mahmoud al-Abash. Mahmoud al-Abash is the most important religious leader in the Palestinian Authority. Mahmoud Abbas appointed him as his personal advisor on Islam. He appointed him to be the head of the religious courts, so he is the voice of religion and religious ideology in the PA. Listen to what he says the conflict is about. And I said before, we have to know, what are we fighting about? Why are they fighting us? Listen to what the conflict is about.
في فلسطين بيننا وبين هذا الاحتلال المجرم صورة أخرى من صور الصراع التاريخي بين الحق والباطل، بين الخير والشر. على مدى التاريخ كان هناك صراع بين الخير والشر. الخير يمثله الأنبياء وأتباع الأنبياء، والشر يمثله الأبائل وأتباع الأبائل، الشياطين وأتباع الشياطين. ونحن ها هنا بدعة من الأمر. هو صراع بين حقيقتين، حقيقة الخير وحقيقة الشر، بين مشروعين، مشروع الرحمن ومشروع الشر.
Okay, what are we fighting against? We're fighting against, the Palestinians are fighting against Satan's project. Throughout history, Jews, he's saying, because if it's throughout history, it's not Israelis, Jews have represented falsehood, evil, the devil. We are the devil and Satan's representative. That means we're the ones doing evil in the world, and therefore Israel is a problem not because of what borders we're living in, but because of what we are. We are Satan's project. We are Satan, the force of evil in the world. Now, this is coming from the top ideologue. How is this passed on to children? The most important Palestinian children's program, Beit Biyut, the best home. This we have heard 6 different times by children on TV.
صديقتي أقلادنا تمتد من أقصى إلى أقصى، وأن حروبنا كانت لأجل المسجد الأقصى، وأن عدونا صهيون شيطان له ذيل. Okay, our enemy Zion is Satan with a tail. In recent years, from that girl, this child, this child, this child, another child as well. All of them repeating the same message. So children, school-age children, some of them preschool, are getting this message, Israel is Satan. Now, the youngest age category that we've seen this to is this one over here. This is a special program that was produced for the Ramadan. It was broadcast twice to Palestinian children, once a few years ago on PA TV, Palestinian official TV, once it was produced on Fatah TV just last year. And by the way, everything I'm showing you from television, this is official TV, it's government controlled, this is not private TV like you have. This is official messaging from the leadership. Now, what does this program show? I'll show you. This is a program, obviously it's cartoons, it's targeting even preschoolers. This was on every day during the Ramadan. For a full 28 days, 28. Listen to the message that preschoolers are getting about Satan and the Jews.
قد هزمنا يا لعين أمام جندي من جنود الله له الرعب هو من هزم اليهود وأخرجهم من ديارهم في خزي عار. قد بنيت خطتي على نار الحقد والكراهية التي تملأ قلوب اليهود
ومحمد وأتباعه. يا لضياع هيبتنا بسبب محمد.
كمن القبائل من يريد القضاء على محمد. إذا فلنخرج الآن للقبائل ونجمع العدة لحرب محمد. هيا بنا.
لقد رأيت الرسول وكان يحكم بيده مع المسلمين. وهل يأمن الرسول بني قريظة؟ إنهم على عهد مع رسول الله. ومنذ متى واليهود يحافظون على.
Okay, since when do Jews keep their Jews? These are the messages coming through to children about Satan. Satan has this plan, and he is going to have the Jews. And they're fighting against who? Against Muhammad, the founder of their religion, the person who they admire, the person you can't even draw a picture of him. And what the Jews are conspiring. So this is coming. So the message coming from the top religious leader, children's programs, and even to preschoolers is the Jews are connected to Satan in the world. Now, I want to show you how they then interpret history. Everything that happens in history is being interpreted through this prism of everything evil that happens in the world the Jews are responsible for. And I'm going to show you this from a number of different examples. First of all, when Muslims fight Muslims, who's really responsible? It's the Jews. And this was a cartoon that Fatah put on their Facebook page, on their official website 3 times last year. It was so important for them. As we know, in the Middle East, the Sunni and the Shia are killing themselves. Hundreds of thousands of Muslims have been killed by other Muslims. So this was the cartoon. The Shia and the Sunni are each blowing each other up, but who's really responsible? This is really the Jew who's responsible. This was Muslims killing Muslims. It's the Jew who's behind it. The Paris attack in November 2015, 129 killed. ISIS took responsibility, of course, and this is what Fatah presented. ISIS pulled the trigger, but it was Benjamin Netanyahu who actually was directing it. Muslims killed Christians. Jews are responsible. This is a top important religious leader in the Palestinian Authority. Listen to what he teaches in his weekly program on Palestinian TV.
بالبركة ولا بهداءة البال ولا براحة الحال وما زال هؤلاء مفسدون في الأرض حتى قال لي أحد كبار السن لو أن سمكة تقاتلت مع سمكة في البحر لأيقنت أن وراءها.
Okay, if a fish in the sea fights... Now, the first time I heard this, if a fish fights another fish, I thought he was exaggerating, and I thought he was joking. The more I thought about it, though, I realized if you understand the Satan ideology, everything evil in the world, every fight, everything happens in the world, it's because of Satan, and the Jews are connected with. So he might have meant this seriously. And I'll tell you interesting, I was once presenting this to students from Brandeis University who are in Israel. And I talked about this, and I talked about Palestinian Islam, and I talked about this message. And he says, why are you talking about Palestinian Islam? So one of the boys from Brandeis gets up and he asks a question. He says, first of all, you should know I'm a Muslim. I was born in India. I also lived in Pakistan many years and a number of years in the United States. And then he says to me, you're talking about Palestinian Authority, Islam. There's no such thing as Palestine. This is Islam. And then he said, you should know that in Pakistan, no one ever met a Jew in their life. But if a Pakistani is driving down a road and his car breaks down, he's going to slam his hands and he's going to say, damn those Jews who caused my car to break down. And a Muslim told me this. And where does that come from? It comes from this ideology. If a fish fights a fish, a Jew is behind it. If the car breaks down, the Jew is behind it. The Jew is the evil force. It's something that is so foreign to us. We can't understand it. To place this magical evil power onto someone else. But you have to look at the world through their eyes if you can understand what we're dealing with this enemy who wants to destroy us. In any case, this is the message. Every evil in the world. Now, I just want to show you how far this goes. Kim Kardashian. Everybody knows who Kim Kardashian is? Kim Kardashian last year had her jewelry stolen. It was very well publicized. She was in France. They tied her up with a gunpoint. They forced her to open up the safe or whatever it was. So a few months later, they found a group of 17 thieves, and they arrested them who were involved in this. And there was an article in Yediot Ahronot, the Israeli newspaper, and the article said it was all the details about the thieves. The 2 heads of the group were actually Algerians, so they were Muslims. Then it mentioned, because it's an Israeli paper, it mentioned that her driver and his brother were also arrested, and it said, and they might be Jews. That was the whole Jewish connection. And I want to show you some more, so the article was about 17 people, not Jews, and there might have been 2 Jews. Now, but you're going to see it, you can hear in a few seconds, this is This person is the Palestinian Authority television's expert on Israeli affairs. And every morning he takes the Israeli newspapers and he goes through things and he explains the real meaning behind what you can learn from the Israeli newspapers. Listen to the way he explained this article that I just told you about.
قال يهود قاموا بسرقة المطربة كيم كاردشيان بيان اليهود هيك مكتوب بشأن هيك مكتوب في وضح ونوط مش في مكتوب يهود هل سامقين يعني ايش بصرفوا الأراضي كمان لا ولكن لم يتم العثور على خاتم الخطوبة الذي يساوي 5 مليون دولار.
Okay. Now, this is the classic racism or anti-Semitism, which is what? If one person of an ethnic group somewhere in the world does a crime, you generalize and then blame the whole group. And it's been, this kind of racism has been used to create hatred against many groups, and that's exactly what he's doing here. The article mentioned, and the Jews did it. The Jews are thieves, we learned from this. They took the engagement. He adds all these, and this is their expert on Israel affairs. But it's all connected to that message of Satan. And that's the point. The Jews are responsible for every evil. It's so foreign to us, but you have to understand it plays out. And I'm giving you just a couple of examples amongst the hundreds and hundreds that we get in the book. Now, what's the great tragedy of all of this? Because the Jews are the evil force in the world representing Satan, then the only solution really is to get rid of the Jews, to exterminate the Jews. Now you heard it from the religious leader. Humanity will never live in peace until the Jews are gone. Now I want to show you, sometimes they're very explicit about this. You can hear the Mufti here. The Mufti is the highest appointed religious official. This is the highest title in the PA, religious official. Listen to what he says they're fighting about. We're not fighting about territory, he says. We're fighting against Israel about something else. Now, the first person who's going to introduce the Mufti is the moderator. Listen to the way he introduces him. Okay. Our war with descendants of apes and pigs is religion and faith. So first of all, note the expression. It's not only children who are taught it, it's used by the leadership as an expression about Jews. But worse than that, it's a war of religion and faith. We're not fighting about territory. If it's territory, we can compromise. If it's religion and faith, there's nothing to compromise about. And that's the great tragedy of this, and that's the great tragedy of the other religious leader who said it. They're Satan. There is nothing that we can do to ever satisfy the problem if this is a religious war. Nothing. Now, in English, they're going to say something else, give us more land. But to their own people, this is what it's about. It's religion. Now, why do I say they're becoming like Hamas? Because that is Hamas' open expressed ideology. It's religion, it's faith. In fact, in the Hamas charter, if you read it, you'll see they actually complain about the PLO who says it's about land. How can you say it's land? We're doing this for Allah. We're doing it for religion. So this is it. It's religion. Now, then he goes on, he introduces the Mufti at this Fatah event, and what's the solution? Listen to what the Mufti says. Okay. The end of time. The Geula, redemption, resurrection. This will only happen. What is the condition? The extermination of Jews. There's actually a whole list of them. One of them is the extermination. So therefore, every time you kill a Jew, every time a Muslim kills a Jew, every time a Palestinian kills a Jew, they're actually bringing the world closer to redemption. That's the message coming from here, from the senior religious figure in the Palestinian Authority, the Mufti himself. Last year it was said explicitly on TV during the terror wave, this is a preacher doing the Friday sermon on official PA TV, count their numbers and kill them to the last one. Allah punish the wicked Jews. Kill them to the last one. Notice it's also important. Punish the wicked Jews. We're not to be killed arbitrarily. We're being killed because we're being punished because of what we are, who we are, we're wicked. This is the message coming from official Palestinian TV. Sounds like Hamas, exactly, but it's the PA. These are the messages coming from the PA to its people. Now, why is all this religious hate so important? Look at this poll in the Palestinian Authority taken last year. Palestinians were asked, in general, is religion an important part of your life? And in The total was 95% said yes. In the West Bank it was 96. In Gaza it was, thank you. In Gaza it was 93%. So you have an incredibly religious society. Over 90% thinking religion is important, and the religious leaders are telling them these messages. That's why this is so dangerous. Now, these messages aren't coming just this way. I want to show you quickly how these messages to fight and kill Jews and Israelis are even taught to children at the youngest age. We started with Achel V'Nashra. I want to show you how this is being sent even to children. Now, everything I'm showing you, children's programs here in 2017, all very current.
يا غفتنا يا غزتنا على الصوت الزوجات يردنا الحين ما فات الفوت زي ما كلعناهم من غزة وزديرون زي ما ذبحناهم في شوارع بيروت مجلك يا ابو عمار لعيونك احنا نموت بعد الظلام نهار يسقط ورق التوت بكره نجيب الثار قائدهم بتابوت احنا الفتح عصام للثروة الناقوت اوه محمد.
Okay, children's program, Our Blood is Food for the Revolution. Their leader will be carried in a coffin. One example. Another example, this on, again, official Palestinian TV. To war that will smash the oppression and destroy the Zionist soul. This is the 6th child in recent years that we've heard recite this identical poem. To war that will destroy the Zionist soul. Here's another girl, also April of this year, children's program, shoot in the name of God, the path of the martyrs is above all. Another one also this year, a martyr defends his homeland or honor or fights those who don't believe in Allah. She goes on, martyrdom death is the high and supreme level according to Allah. A young child is being taught to teach other children that dying as a martyr is the best thing that she can achieve. This is all happening in the children's world in the Palestinian Authority. And here's just one more example. Okay, my rock has turned into an AK-47. Children are throwing rocks, but it's not just going to be a rock. I'm going to go up to Kalashnikov assault rifles. All of this is the children's world of the Palestinian Authority. We're seeing it here. I'm giving you the examples from PA official TV. We get the same messaging in the Palestinian schools. It's coming through sporting events, we know, the glorification of death. So this is the world of the Palestinian Authority. We talked in the beginning about naming sporting events. After terrorists, the Palestinian Authority has named 28 schools at least after terrorists, another 3 after Nazi collaborators. We talked before about Dalal Mughrabi, who killed these 12 children. There are 3 schools named after Dalal Mughrabi. This is the bus that she hijacked. She's turned into a Palestinian hero. This is a girl. These are girls who are in one of the Dalal Mughrabi schools. I want you to see, the Palestinian Authority interviewed, went to this school. I want you to see what being in a school named after a terrorist does to the children. Listen to these girls speak.
متواجدين حاليا بمدرسة دلال المغربي لحتى نتعرف وإياكم على أصل حكاية هالشهيدة وهالمناضلة الفلسطينية. دلال المغربي قائدة عظيمة. هذه المناضلة ربما ماتت وصعدت روحها إلى السماء، ولكن ما زالت أمهاتنا تنجب ألف دلال وما زالت روحها سارية فينا. دلال المغربي أعطتنا الكثير، وأنا شخصيا أفتخر بأنني أنتمي إلى مدرسة دلال المغربي، وأمنية حياتي أن أصل للدرجة التي توصلت إليها.
Okay, life's ambition is to reach the level of this person who murdered 37 people. That's the messaging coming through. Now, multiply this by tens of thousands of children who are going through these schools named after terrorists, and hundreds of thousands who know the existence of these schools, and you realize what's happening in the world of the Palestinian child. Death and killing is becoming a priority. It's becoming the model that these girls are seeing. I'm going to show you one of the most evil things that we see. We saw the little children talking about how they want to be martyrs. And in fact, during last year's terror, there were a lot of children who went on terror attacks, even knowing that they weren't going to survive. They were attacking soldiers sometimes. Now, 16 12th graders died last year in terror attacks. And the Palestinian Authority, instead of coming to their children and saying, listen, look what they did. They went out on terror attacks. They didn't graduate high school. They're not going to have a life. They're not going to get married. You shouldn't do that. They did just the opposite. I'm going to show you what they did. On the anniversary when everybody else was getting matriculation, on the date that everybody was getting matriculation, July 11th, when the results of the tests were being publicized, the word for matriculation is the same word as dying for Allah. They both mean both shahada. Shahada can be a certificate, matriculation. It can also be dying for Allah. Why, by the way? I'll just tell you a little bit of the root. Both of them come from the word testimony. If you die for Allah, Allah is witness that you died for Him, and this is a witness that you succeeded in school. So the same word. So look what they did on the day of matriculation. They went as follows. They publicized an official Palestinian news agency. The day of the publication of high school matriculation exams, the families of the martyrs and their relatives find themselves proud of the martyrdom that their children achieved with the Creator. 16 students succeeded, for death as a martyr is the path to excellence and greatness, and the path of those who know how to reach the great victory. Instead of saying, they didn't graduate, don't follow, don't do what they did, it did just the opposite. It told all of the Palestinian youth, those who died attacking Israelis, they took the quick path to excellence. That was the play to a great victory. Again, it's mind-boggling to teach your kids to strive for death, to aspire death even more than aspiring life and succeeding, the same way it was done with the example of Ahmad Nasr. I want to touch with just one example on some of the things that Eve was talking about. She was talking about the Palestinians. She said, are claiming all of Israel. They even on what I've showed you, by the way, is that the fundamental problem is not land. The fundamental problem is we are Jews. We Jews don't have a right to exist. Not just the land, not just Israel, but the Jews. Israel has to be exterminated. Jews have to be exterminated. But even when it comes to land, they don't tell their children the problem is West Bank, Judea, Samaria. Look what they tell their children. I'm going to give you one example. We've seen this dozens of times in children's programs. This is the message coming to kids. This is that same program that you've been watching from. Listen to this.
أصدقائي بحكي لكم يعني يافا أكيد مش يافا وبس، يافا وحيفا وعكا والنصر وكل المدن الفلسطينية اللي احتلت ب 48 رح ترجع لنا بيوم.
Okay. Everything is an occupation. Jaffa, Haifa, Akko. We've heard this also hundreds of times on Palestinian TV, Palestinian radio, children's programs. It's all occupied. There is no legitimacy to anything about Israel, and this is what the children are being brought up on. The result of this message, there was a poll a few years ago where they asked Palestinians, do you recognize Israel's right to exist? And they asked, so 50% of the adults over age 50 said Israel has a right to exist. The youngest age category, age 18 to 25, 8% said Israel had a right to exist. So we see the success of this education. The older people who grew up before the Oslo Accords, they recognized Israel's right to exist. But the young kids who were brought up on the education of the Palestinian Authority, less than 10% give Israel the right to exist. So you put these messages together. Israel as a state has no right to exist. The Jews as individuals have no right to exist because they're descendants of monkeys and pigs, and because they're Allah's. Why should we be surprised that there's a 13-year-old Ahmad ben Nasr who goes out and stabs an Israeli? You know what? I don't even blame Ahmad ben Nasr. I don't even blame him. Because he was, at what point was he supposed to say, well, the messages I'm getting from school, from sports, from my parents, from my teachers, well, that's all false. He never had an opportunity to even step out of it. And that's the great tragedy of these children. They are being taught at such a young age. They're being taught at such a young age that there's no way that they can see the world differently. It's a tragedy for them, and then when they grow up, of course, it becomes a tragedy for Israel, and there are going to be many, many victims on all sides, on both sides, because of this hate education of the Palestinian Authority. The final thing that I want to show, I want to show you two more things. Just one example. The last while, we've been having terror in Israel for the last few days, and I just want to show you how much Fatah, has been directly involved. Again, Fatah is supposedly the moderate party. This is what Fatah publicized on Friday. On Friday, this was the morning of the attack that a Palestinian terrorist went into a home and killed a man, 70-year-old man, and 2 of his children. Stabbed them to death in their home while they were having the Shabbat meal. This is what Fatah produced the morning of Friday. They put this on their Facebook page, and it says, if I fall, I will not be the first to die and not the last to die. Oh, my brothers, I will write my will with my blood, guard my revolution with your blood. Through Fatah, masses sweeping to attack. I am Fatah, the revolution. I am a storm, rage of Jerusalem. With this picture, the message is going. And this is one. We released dozens and dozens of examples of Fatah and the PA calling for violence and calling for terror, calling for escalation even. What was the result? The results were the killing. So what happens is you've got all of this hatred I've been showing you is always there. And then when the Fatah needs terror, then they come out and say, okay, now's the day that you do it. Now we want you to go out and kill. Tomorrow you kill. Now and so that you always have a steady diet of hatred, so that it's always simmering in the background. And then when Abbas wants terror, he can call for it in a second because all the infrastructure is there already. Now the final thing I want to show you is what Hillary Clinton said about this. And it was mentioned earlier, I do a lot of work with foreign governments and speak in many parliaments and spoken many times in Congress as well, just a few months ago in the Foreign Affairs Committee. In 2007, when Hillary Clinton was a senator, we had a press conference together in the Senate when we released a report on Palestinian school books. Now, I want you to listen to what she said. Now, you can hear not Arabic now, but Hebrew, because this is Israeli TV news story on the press conference that we had together.
לא בכל יום נפרסים כך ספרי הלימוד הפלסטינים על השולחן בסנאט האמריקני, אבל כשהילרי קלינטון מטרידה ההסתה שבספרים האלה, זה קורה.
We must stop the propaganda to which Palestinian children are being exposed. Palestinians are fighting the battle of Israel.
הילרי נותנת כאן חסות למחקר החדש של ארגון מבט לתקשורת פלסטינית. ספרי הלימוד האלה נכנסו לתוכנית הלימודים רק בנובמבר האחרון. והשנאה ממש נוטפת מהם.
These textbooks do not give Palestinian children an education, they give them an indoctrination. It basically profoundly poisons the minds of these children.
Okay, that was the key expression. Profoundly poisons the minds of these children. And I like that word poisons because someone who's poisoned is a victim. And Palestinian children are victims as well of this hatred that she was talking about. And even more significantly, 2007 to where we are today, those kids who were poisoned that she was talking about are the teenagers and the young 20-year-olds who are leading the terror that we're having today. In other words, when people just use the general word incitement, say, okay, stop the incitement. It's too late in many respects. All of these kids who have been poisoned, not just incitement, it's been poisoning them, indoctrinating them. These are Hillary Clinton's words. And I completely agree with these words. And that's the tragedy. Today we have, I call them the lost Palestinian generation. They have been poisoned by their leaders with such hatred that Israel and the Jews, who've really only been good neighbors to them all along, not going to get into that now, but if you want to bring it up in the questions, they think that we are connected to Satan. We're the evil in the world that has to be fought. And now we have to go and make peace with them. So that's the great tragedy that we're facing in Israel. We go to parliaments, we go to Hillary Clinton, we're going to the world, and basically what we're telling all of them is, your money that you've been giving the Palestinian Authority is guaranteeing that we're going to have a war in the next generation. We show them where their money goes, we show them it goes to Palestinian TV, we show them who they're paying the salaries for. And what's happened in recent years is there's been a tremendous change in Europe, in the United States. The United States today, for example, has before Congress the Taylor Force Act. Many of you might have heard about it. It's an act that's going to cut off all funding to the Palestinian Authority from the United States if they continue to pay salaries to terrorists. The fact that they pay salaries to terrorists, something that Palestinian Media Watch exposed a number of years ago, and we've gone around the world explaining this to people around the world, to governments. Look where your money is going. Instead of helping Palestinians, Palestinian Authority is paying terrorists who were arrested with very, very high salaries, way higher than the average salary in the Palestinian Authority, and many, many more things. It is our hope that by bringing this and constantly bringing this and getting the world leaders to recognize how serious this problem is of the messaging of the Palestinian leaders to their people and their children, they will use their financial aid as leverage to demand a total change in the Palestinian Authority messaging. That is our hope. Without that, we're going to have at least another generation and then another of hatred and terror and wars. So it's our hope that eventually the international community will understand that without that leverage, to force the Palestinians to change the messaging of peace, and if they do succeed and the Palestinian Authority stops this messaging and starts honest, authentic, and decent messaging, it will be then the beginning of the peace process that we hope for. Thank you.
An incredible talk, frustrating to listen to it. The question is, what do we do about this other than exposing it, which is what Palestinian Media Watch does, other than teaching people who come to Israel what the truth is about this land, Judea and Samaria, as Harrow does. But it seems like we're almost wasting our time, like we're proverbially knocking our heads against the wall, as my mother often told me to do. Just put just two. So I'm going to ask both Eve and Itamar to come up, have a seat, and we're going to open this to questions. But the first thing I want to ask both of them, since it seems like there's no way to change this, and since it is the Palestinian leadership through the state-run TV and other vehicles, should we not be going after the leadership, and how do we go about doing that? Maybe that's the way to start changing this. And even when it does begin to change, it's going to take a decade, at least. So let me ask both of you, starting with Itamar.
Definitely, first of all, the messages are coming from the leadership. This could not possibly be happening without the leadership. Not only that, we often hear the leaders themselves saying the identical messages, and that's why this is critical. This idea of going after the leaders is very important, and I think it's actually, and in fact, it's something that Palestinian Media Watch started about a year and a half ago. Well, what happened was the Palestinian Authority has been losing a lot of funding. We knew that the loss of funding would be something that would put pressure on them, but we realized at a certain point that they don't care that much about the funding, but they certainly care about themselves as individual leaders. So what we started to do is go after the leaders who most explicitly promoted terror openly on television, so they couldn't deny it. And we've gone to governments around the world, and we've told them, look at what this and this person said. I'll tell you specifically one example of what we've done. Jibril Rajoub. You saw that Jibril Rajoub's name was mentioned about the sporting events. Earlier, he's the one who said that the sporting event was a crime against humanity. Well, during the terror last year, Jibril Rajoub went on television, and he said, we bless and encourage them. He's talking about the individual terrorists. He said, we bless and encourage them. He specifically mentioned a person named Mohammed Khalidi. Mohammed Khalidi was a terrorist who actually triggered and started the entire thing. He stabbed 2 people to death in the old city of Jerusalem. That started the entire way. And he said, we bless and encourage them. They are crowns of glory on the heads of every Palestinian. So what did we do with this? We put together a full dossier on Jibril Rajoub. And we started to go to governments around the world. And we started to tell them, listen, this person should not be, and we then looked into the laws of every country. And we said, accepting him into your country violates this law. We showed it that we did this in Britain very intensively. It was in Britain 6 times. It was in Britain 3 times, and I spoke in Parliament last year, and I spoke to 3 other delegations. So 6 times I met with British MPs. We have dozens and dozens and dozens of MPs working with Palestinian Media Watch in British Parliament today. And what did we succeed in doing? There already have been letters that have gone to the Home Secretary in Britain that if Jibril Rajoub tries to come into the country, he should not be accepted into the country. We tried to do this last year when he came to the United States. And what happened was the State Department issued statements condemning everything that he said, but they weren't going to prevent him from coming in. But the place where he was speaking, we also asked them not to allow him to speak there. And it turned out to be the entire evening was focused on the material that we brought about him. that we exposed about him. So what happened is Jibril Rajoub now we have this entire dossier on him. And every place he goes in the world now, we are going to have all of the things that he's following him. One of the things we want to do this year is prepare dossiers on every single Palestinian leader. And every single time that we follow them from their Facebook page, we know when they're traveling, every single place, every one of them wants to go. We want to challenge the countries. Don't let them in and let all of them have to defend themselves. We want to change the atmosphere where Israel's on the defensive. We want to put them on the defensive because they are the real criminals here. They're the ones who are promoting terror. So yes, I agree with you. It's something that we've started doing already. We have to go after the leadership of the Palestinian Authority. They cannot have a pass, have a buy here, just because they have titles in front of their names. If we're going after the terrorists who are doing the shooting, we also have to go after the terrorists who are teaching them to shoot.
Thank you. Eve, a question for you. First off, can you tell us briefly about Efrat? What is this community? How large is it? Who lives in it? What's the mood in it? Are they building to expand? And this is just one example of what we watch and we hope for. What is the mood of your neighbors living where they live in Judea?
So the first thing that I want to say is you all have to come to Israel. You all have to see it for yourselves. Okay? I was speaking to a few people before we started this evening who said to me, we went to Israel and we saw these settlements. We saw communities. We saw beautiful communities where people are working hard, where the kids are going to the army, who are an asset to Israeli society, that are right outside Jerusalem, not in the middle of nowhere and not bothering anybody else. You have to see that for yourselves. It's imperative you see that for yourselves. So Efrat is a community that's closing in now on 15,000 people, but I can tell you that there's a tremendous housing shortage in Israel in general. And Judea and Samaria is a reservoir of land. My own married son and his 2 children are now living in my basement because they couldn't afford to, we're helping them, to subsidize them basically, because it is very, very expensive for our kids to live. And so we turned our basement, as the kids got older and moved out, we turned our basement into an apartment, and they're going to be there hopefully temporarily, but we'll see how that goes. So that it's a lovely community to live in, but it's a community of people who are doing things. We're not the only ones who are out there doing things and saying that there is an imperative to come out and to make sure that people know what the truth is. But I wanted to bring the lens out a little bit just from the Palestinian-Israeli issue into the entire Middle East. What we're fighting in Israel is not just our fight. This ideology that Itamar so eloquently and has tremendous proof is your fight as well. Israel is the little Satan, America is the great Satan. And we talk about these children that are being totally indoctrinated, brainwashed, poisoned, pick whatever word you want, in the Palestinian Authority territories, but the same thing is happening now in Europe with kids who are coming out of jihadist Syria and all these places and infiltrating Europe and doing a lot of harm there, and who knows when it's going to come here. So this is not just an issue of Israel and our problems. The Jews tend to be the canary in the coal mine in any event. Whoever comes after the Jews ends up coming after everybody else. And so you need to understand what's happening to us because it is coming your way. It is not just our fight. But as a mother, in addition to having 7 children, I have 7 grandchildren. I live in a democracy, which means that I get the right to vote for my government and to ask my government to do what it's voted to do, which is to protect my people. So the first thing that I want my government to do is what I want it to not do, and to not continue with this path towards some kind of state, which means that all of this they can do and we can't interfere. Because once they have a state, and once they have their own army, once they have their own borders, we can't do anything about it anymore. All right, we've lost whatever little control we already have. They can bring in 1.5 million Syrian refugees that they want. They can bring in jihadists from anywhere that they want, who can be 5, 6, 7 miles from Tel Aviv. We will have lost all control. So the first thing is what not to do, is to not let this farce of an Oslo Accords continue. And that is what we have to do as Israelis to make sure that our government protects us from this. They have their work to do. And one of the hardest things that we have in any relationship, be it with a spouse, is to understand that at some point you can't change the other. You can deal with it, you cannot deal with it, you can get out of the relationship, whatever it is. But the other side has work to do. Both Christianity and Judaism went through reformations, went through soul searching. I interviewed him on the radio show, and I highly advise you to hear it. He's not the only one. Dr. Harrow wrote last week. An expert on Islam. He was the Pentagon's expert on Islam and on Turkey and Iran for many, many years. And he and others, Bernard Lewis and others, have done extensive work on the Muslim world. They have a lot of work to do because they're killing each other. Forget the rest of us. Forget the Jews and the Christians. They are killing each other. And they have to sort out their world, and in the meantime, we have to make sure that we don't go down with them. So I think that this is something also that we need to know. What's being shown on the screen here very much relates to you as well. This is a real evil, and we have to stop this in any way we can.
A couple of years ago, in the UN. I'm sorry?
How about some questions? People want to ask questions. They'd like to ask questions.
I'll be happy to. Stuart. Nice and loud.
What I'm hearing is that the people don't want peace, that a two-state solution would be devastating to Israel. So my question to you is, where does this go? You have all of these angry people at your door, and what are you going to do? And what are you going to do about the war of demographics?
And population.
Well, I did my bit with demographics. I just want you to know that. Tomorrow's blood. The war of demographics is not nearly as bad as you think it is. And the expert on that is Yoram Ettinger. And I highly advise that you go look at his work. The Israeli Jewish population, the Israeli Jewish woman is it's closing in on 4, about 3.5 children per family. Because we happen to be happy, despite what everybody would like us. I think Israel it's the highest birth rate in the Western world, while the Palestinian Arab women is dropping. As they get more educated and they go out into the workforce as well, theirs is dropping. So it's now the same. Are we ever going to catch up? No, because the world has done its bit on the slaughter of Jews over the last thousands of years, so we're never going to have the numbers. But the demographics is not a reason to leave land. It's not a reason to say, we're going to leave Judea and Samaria because there's more Arabs here than Jews. The reason there's more Arabs than Jews in Judea and Samaria is twofold. One is in 1948 they killed the Jews that were living there and threw them out. And two, the refugee camps that were established not only in Judea and Samaria, but in Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, and Jordan were established by Arabs for Arabs. So one of the first things also that has to be done is UNRWA. They have their own refugee organization, the Palestinians. They're the only people in the world whose great-grandchildren are also refugees. I bet most of us, if that's the category for refugees, I bet everyone in this room is a refugee. How many of us have parents or grandparents who weren't thrown out of somewhere, and not because they started a war and lost it? So there are many things that can be done. One is putting pressure on the world to completely disband UNRWA and to take these people who've been living in misery in refugee camps because of their own brothers for the last 70 years and repatriate them around the world. That right there will take off a lot of pressure, and a lot of these people will see that they have a decent life, and they'll also see that the world cares. Because right now, it's not so clear that the world cares. All right? By letting them live in this misery because it's just somebody else's problem is actually quite patronizing to the Arab world. And that's something that's one of the things that we can do about it. I'm not worried about the demographics because that's not a reason to leave the land. If it was the case, we're living as 6.5 million Jews right about now in a sea of about 800 million Arabs in the Middle East. We can't go by the demographics.
I just want to say one thing also in terms of what can be done. If you remember one of the quotes that I opened with, a 11-year-old Palestinian boy, after having played one day of soccer with Israeli kids, said he learned that it's great to play together like this. I hope one day there'll be peace and no more war. With that in mind, and realizing how people-to-people contact does bring peace, there's a program that we started recommending to foreign countries who are donating money to the Palestinian Authority. And I'll start with Britain, for example. We're calling it the 10% solution. What is it? That of all the funding that you give to we want the international community to combine and do this. The Palestinians get about $500 million a year, $500 million. 10% would be about $50 million. We're telling the international community, and we're telling the members of Congress as well, 10% of the money, $50 million a year, should go to build this massive, or a few massive peace parks in these people. Now, the Palestinian Authority is against having peace parks where they have normal activities between Israelis and Palestinians. 90% of the money that they get is going to be conditioned on them agreeing to the 10%. We want to build these peace parks. In these peace parks, we're talking about having basketball courts, soccer fields, we're talking about cultural places, we're talking about teaching music centers, chess clubs. We're talking about building up a massive infrastructure where children, young children, 11, 12, 13, 15, not the 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds because they're gone already, but the very young children can have one-to-one interaction with Israelis and Palestinians. Now, what will happen? First of all, $15 million is a ton of money. It's a lot of money. It means it can be implemented very, very quickly. And what will happen then is that we're going to bypass the Palestinian leadership. If we allow the Palestinian leaderships to be the only ones who are educating their children, there will be no chance for peace. We want to have the kids educated through by themselves, through meeting Israelis, by people-to-people activities. Now, it sounds like a dream, but I just want you to know, last year, at a certain point after one of our presentations in British Parliament, there was a big debate in British Parliament where all of our material was quoted. A few weeks later, in fact, one of the members of Parliament criticized the Home Secretary, the Secretary in terms of development. He said, if you want to know that everything I'm saying is true, go to the Palestinian Media Watch website, and he gave the address, and there you'll see all of this is true. Our money is being wasted, that's what he said. And what happened is that day, they froze all British funding to the VA, and then 2 months later, they decided to open it up again, and not 10%, but 30% of their money already now is going to people-to-people activities, peace-building activities. Now, Britain, we succeeded. If we can succeed in having all the donor countries agree together and to pool their money and to build up these centers, what we're talking about is essentially creating peace without the leadership. We're not going to be signing a peace treaty, but we'll be making real peace on the ground. This is something that we believe can be accomplished, it has to be accomplished, and if we can, and I hope that we will be able to accomplish.
Next question. I just want to say quickly, Monday, we're bringing in a speaker who is going to talk about Jewish Shanghai. I left that out from the beginning. Please come and hear Devir Bar-Gal, 5 o'clock Monday afternoon. Question, please.
Yes. I was wondering how often you speak on campuses in the U.S. I feel that students at American colleges are also being indoctrinated the same way that these Palestinian children are being indoctrinated, and what you are doing, what your efforts are in that area.
What I do is, first of all, once a year, I go to Los Angeles, where an organization called Stand With Us brings together hundreds of student activists from around the United States. And I spend 3 days together with other people training students, giving them the entire presentation of Palestinian Media Watch, and then teaching them how to use this on campus. And what happens is they then go back to all the different campuses. In addition, I speak a number of times a year on campuses. We're giving materials now very actively to organizations. We're trying to encourage every Jewish organization, every Christian organization, every organization that's working for Israel. We're creating posters with our materials now. We're creating so they can then, when the Palestinians create these false posters, with pictures of dead Palestinian children, they can create posters and they can have posters ready to use as a counter. So we're trying to supply all the Jewish organizations with ammunition. And basically what I'd like to do also is train students to be able to make this presentation, train people, theoretically even hire someone, train someone here in the United States who could spend the entire year literally going campus to campus making these presentations. That's one of the goals we have. It has to do with a little bit of expansion that we have to do at the PMW.
But you're absolutely correct that the campuses are...
What you train them to do?
What's that?
What you train them to do?
What do we train them to do?
The last hour and a half, you just put so much fear on us. And you didn't say
you didn't give any advice on how we can resolve this.
There are two things that have to be done. First of all, there are two problems. There's the problem of the Palestinian Authority messaging to their people, which destroys peace. There's a problem of Israel's position in the world because people don't know this. So right now, first of all, the more people that know this, the more governments. Right now, there isn't a government in the world that's not aware of this because of the work that we're doing. So first of all, there's awareness. That's a preliminary before any change can happen. The second thing we're doing now is we're trying to get those governments to change. As I told you, first of all, the government's already cut off almost close to 70% of their funding has been cut off to the Palestinian Authority in the last few years, and the PA has actually said it's because of the things that we've exposed on television. They've lost $700 million in foreign funding because of really, in a lot of part, because of our work. That's the first stage. There's pressure on them. That's the first thing. So there's awareness. There's pressure. So that now the students need this material because what happens on campus is they go on campus and they say Israel is responsible. Palestinians are victim. Israel is responsible. What we train the students to understand is you have to defeat that message that they are victims because of Israel. They are victims because of their own leadership. And we show them how Palestinians are victimized by their own leaders. In other words, we take away, and this is the message I didn't give, it's a little bit different message when I give it to students on campus. I make a lot of the same material, but the end shows them exactly how to use this material to deflect that message. Israel is victimizing the Palestinians. We see, yes, they are victims, they are suffering, but the suffering is coming from their own leaders.
But I would like to answer your question, if I may, on a bigger picture. We have to stop saying no two-state solution because of all this proof. And we have to start giving, and we are now giving, alternative solutions. It is going to take a long, long time, possibly not in our lifetimes, until the Muslim world is really a partner for peace the way that we define it. But in the meantime, there are people who deserve a good quality of life. And so, for example, Dr. Mordechai Kedar, Bar-Ilan University, whom I interviewed a couple of months ago, he has a different plan for a two-state solution. It's something along the idea of the United Arab Emirates, that each of their large cities, which is controlled by their chamula, by a couple of large families in Ramallah, in Hebron, etc., they're the ones who take charge of their city. They don't have security control. Israel retains security control for everybody's sake. But in the meantime, they trade with Israel, they trade in other places, they have a quality of life, they have self-respect. If the people in the Palestinian Authority understand that it's through Israel that they will have a more decent quality of life and not through their leaders, then perhaps that way they will be able to change. Because I listen to the idea of the camp and I think to myself, they're going to go to the camp, but then they're going to go home to their parents who are afraid of the Palestinian leadership, maybe. Like, they're very, very intimidating. We're not intimidating the Israelis. For all that everybody's so scared, we're really not that intimidating. And so if they see, as it was before 93, that the jobs are available through Israel, which is things that we're trying to do all the time. We have industrial zones set up all out through Judea and Samaria, where Jews and Arabs work together, earn the same salary. They may not be able to say it in front of the cameras yet, because they'll get a death penalty from their leaders if they say something good about Israel. But maybe slowly, if they realize that there will never be a Palestinian state under this horrible leadership, and then they can be brave enough to come out and say, you know, people want to feel secure. And if Israel is the one that makes them feel secure, and I think we can do it, then maybe they'll be able to also say, we're done with these guys. Just like the Druze and other minorities in Israel have been able to do that, right? The two border policemen who were murdered that Friday, 3 Israeli Arabs murdered 2 Druze Israelis. Okay, the Druze are some of the best Israelis we have, some of the most loyal, because they understand that Israel gives them so much. It's going to take time. We all want quick solutions and we all want fast things. It doesn't work like that with human nature. But my government needs to first say what we're not doing and then say what we are doing. And that is up to those of us who live in Israel to make sure that our government does what we think that they need to do.
But you're talking about a two-state solution.
No, I'm not.
It's impossible.
Right, I'm saying no. No. Then you misunderstood.
You presented a scenario depicting these people the way they are, what they're poisoning their children's minds. So, and you're talking about making nice, trying to get them to have better lives. They're living terribly, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is that right now, that isn't feasible. That's not viable. You know, you've got an enemy at your door, just like that gentleman in that colorful gentleman stated earlier. And I just don't understand how you can even talk about a two-state solution.
I'm not talking about a two-state solution. I'm saying, no, I am not. And if you're misunderstanding, we need to try and bypass their leadership as much as we possibly can. And the only way to do that is to give them an alternate. What are the other options? We could go kill them all. That's nothing anybody wants to do. We could throw them all out. That's nothing that anybody wants to do. We have people living amongst us whose leadership has betrayed them. My leadership, I think, gives a pretty good life.
So then you have to do something about their leadership, and you have to do something about Israeli PR, and you have to do something about helping Israeli people to defend themselves, like the Solomons, who were wiped out in their house.
One Israel Fund, which Alan mentioned, that I'm the director of tourism, is specifically in Judea and Samaria. And I can tell you, because I work for this organization, that we knew that there were not cameras around Neve Tzuf. We knew that there were holes in the security, and we're trying to raise money, as we have in other communities, to get those cameras in. But people, unfortunately, only give after the victims are on the front page. People don't want to give to something if it's not going to make the headlines, because, right? It's like, but we have had tremendous successes. You don't know how many terror acts have been stopped because they're not sexy. They don't make the headlines. All right, I know because I'm involved. And that was a tragedy that could have been prevented if enough people wanted to be involved with that and say, the Jews belong in Judea and Samaria, and we're going to protect them and make sure that they stay there. Because every time there's a success and you kill Jews, that revs them up to want to do it even more. And what I can do from my side is A, try and get people to give, and B, not go anywhere. Because when they realize that their terror is not getting them what they want, maybe, just maybe, they'll stop doing it. But every time we give in to terror in any way, that just makes it perfect for them, okay? Then they're going to do it even more. It's like our kids. When they throw a tantrum, if you give into the tantrum, you've just set the stage for the next one.
I want all of you to be aware that there is a good deal of information on the two back tables about helping out with these organizations. Palestinian Media Watch helps supporting it. The One Israel Fund helps supporting it so that we can get this work done.